One piece I wanted to touch on moving us forward is there recently was a post on the Solana developer forums kind of formally proposing Alpenglow. And I believe that voting is meant to start this week. Is that right, Carlos?
Yeah, voting is meant to start around, I don't remember the exact epoch, but it would be around Thursday. Like we're recording this on Monday, 25th of August. Like it would start around Thursday and then voting would end beginning of next week. I expect this to pass. I don't think it's controversial like at all. So I think Alpenglow will pass. And yeah, the headline impact of Alpenglow is like 100x reduction in Solana's finality time to around like 150 milliseconds. And it also has other second order effects, like you can start looking at reduction in slot times eventually. Voting transactions are no longer an issue. So yeah, I think it's going to be super beneficial for the network, and I think it's going to pass.
Yeah, and we had Brennan from Anza kind of come on to talk about Alpenglow a couple months ago. So go check out that episode if you haven't seen it. It's a good deep dive into not only the reduction in time to finality, but just all the other things that Solana is hoping Alpenglow will do. I guess if I had to poke a hole in this, the really interesting thing will be what this does for FireDancer, which it is now nearly September of 2025, and full FireDancer is still not yet live on Solana mainnet. We have Frankendancer, which people are running and are seeing fuller blocks, I guess. But this, definitely introduces some uncertainty if you're the FireDancer team, which basically has to follow what Anza does and then try to perfectly, create the same a compatible version, but with different code. Which we also did an episode with Michael McGee from Jump that you should listen to. It was very interesting, talking about what a challenge that is. And so I'm sure those folks will be watching this very closely. And a lot of how soon we actually see FireDancer depends, I guess, on if Alpenglow is approved and if they actually start producing it sooner. Although I would also say, Carlos, I don't know if you get this sense, but it feels to me like in the Solana world, FireDancer is not as much of a talking point as it once was. Like as Anza has kind of just ramped up and started saying like, F it, we can just scale the chain ourselves, and have, proposed Alpenglow, which is this major rewrite to Solana's consensus. And, are just seeing performance improvements generally, doubling the block limit, that kind of thing. You just don't hear FireDancer talked about quite as much as it was in, say, 2023.
I totally agree with you. I think ANSA has killed it in the past year. I remember like a few months ago, they put out this blog post highlighting like the roadmap to 1 million transactions per second. And yeah, I think the longer that FireDancer like takes to ship to mainnet, like the harder time they are going to have like taking market share like from the Agave client, because it just keeps getting better and better like with each passing month. So I do think like the ANSA team is not going to like just let the FireDancer team like take all the validators.
Yeah, and it's a massive engineering problem that Jump is facing, and I don't know. I'm very curious to see, I guess I'll say, how the FireDancer experiment ends. I think that if it takes much longer for full FireDancer to go live, Alpenglow is really hard to mimic, and so it takes a couple more years or something before we see full FireDancer. I think a lot of people will start to say like, oh, maybe this wasn't whatever grant, the Solana Foundation paid Jump in order to build this thing, because they obviously are not doing it for free. That was not a worthwhile investment, because you just got Anza to do all the things that you wanted FireDancer to do, but they did it much faster. And I think that's a little bit of a short-sighted argument. because there is also this whole question of path dependency, where having Jump crypto be associated with you as Solana, and also honestly FTX back in the day, was a signal that you were like a serious chain. You weren't another scam in a world where there's lots of layer one scams that claim that they can do all these revolutionary things. I mean, I remember reading tweet threads in 2022 saying that, Solana is a bunch of bogus nonsense, and they're just, taking advantage of the fact that no one understands blockchains to get all these dummies to invest. And I think the fact that it was like, oh, Jump Crypto, which is like a real, HFT firm, is building infrastructure for Solana, like that put a lot of people at ease. And I think that was why it was such a talking point for so long. And, maybe we don't get to this point where ONS is able to attract talent and bring in all these people who could build the chain to be much more performant if FireDancer wasn't involved, because now people aren't excited about Solana. They're interested in Sui or something. I don't know where else that attention would have gone. But I think regardless of how the Jump experiment winds up and whether FireDancer truly does, and like maybe this is going to get clipped and I'm going to get made fun of because, FireDancer comes out and it like greatly increases the, Solana's performance. But even if it doesn't, I think that it was probably still a worthwhile investment for Solana to make, and certainly increase the number of people who are willing to be interested in building on buying Sol, even post FTX when things looked quite bleak for the chain.
Yeah, I totally agree with. I like that perspective. Like even if FireDancer doesn't like fulfill like its expectations, like at least they provided this competition that allowed ANSA to like really step things up and attract talent. Like I know that Alpenglow, for instance, was proposed by ETH Zurich, like developers that were previously like that found a vulnerability in Solana's code base, and they managed to attract them to actually build Alpenglow. I do think like FireDancer is going to ship eventually, and it's going to be like even more competitive, like from that point of view. One other thing that could be interesting is if we see FireDancer first, like on another SVM chain for like Fogo, for instance. Because, for instance, Fogo is running on a unified FireDancer client. Like I could see a scenario where Fogo just launches FireDancer before Solana, and then we see like how it performs like on another chain.
Sounds like you're gearing up for Fogo fall, Carlos.
Not really. No, it's just just seeing all the possibilities. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one to watch. Fogo sort of fell off my radar a little bit. It would ruffled some feathers when they raised 8 million on basically saying, hey, we're going to have like a more permission validator set and only run FireDancer. But yeah, I think it's going to mainnet soonish, right? I'm not fully up to date on it, but that's a really good point that we may actually see FireDancer on Fogo first. Which, I don't. A lot of Solana people might be none too thrilled with that outcome, but in any event, much to watch there.